Once upon a time, there was once a man of pure grit, intuition, and no excuses. His name is Bob Stoops. If you've watched college football for any length of time, you already know the name. Bob Stoops wasn't just a good coach, he was an Oklahoman legend. He took the Sooners to an undefeated national championship in 2000, kept the Barry Switzer wagon rolling for over a decade, surpassing Switzer as the winningest coach in school history, reached 4 BCS national championship games, and somehow managed to win all of the major BCS bowls during that era. Plus, he won a national championship. That's a resume very few coaches in college football history can even dream of matching. After the 2016 season, he stepped away from coaching, only to return a few years later and write his name in XFL history too, becoming a champion with the Renegades before officially retiring in 2025. Those who know the name are doomed to know it for all of time. Unfortunately, this video isn't about him.
Howdy folks, this is me, Colonel Sanders. For $5 you can fill up your car with gasoline, or you can fill up yourself with my $5 fill up with finger-licking good sauce. It's tender, it's juicy, it's delicious. 3 chicken tenders, taters, and gravy. I throw in a biscuit and a big old cookie.
This video is about one of the younger brothers of Bob Stoops, Mark Stoops. Living in the shadows of one of the greatest coaches in the modern era isn't exactly easy, but to Stoops' credit, he managed to carve out a legacy of his own. When Stoops arrived in Lexington, football at Kentucky was the old yeller that you just felt bad watching. Winning seasons were rare, bowl games were even more of a luxury, and fans had spent decades accepting that football would always be an afterthought in order to funnel in more cash for basketball. But when Stoops arrived to the coal mines, he changed that. He became the winningest head coach in Kentucky football history, passing none other than the Bear himself. Before Stoops took over, Kentucky had reached just 15 bowl games in more than a century of football and only had 2 10-win seasons to their name. Under Stoops, the Wildcats reached 8 consecutive bowl games and doubled the program's total number of 10-win seasons in just 4 years. For the first time in generations, Kentucky fans had legitimate reasons to believe in Kentucky football. They beat rivals they weren't supposed to beat, they knocked off top 10 opponents, they had talent go onward to the NFL, which may or may not include Will Levis in that conversation, and Stoops' coaching staff produced some of the greatest moments in program history. It looked like he had permanently changed what Kentucky football could be. But the football gods have a funny way of reminding you that success does not last forever. What started as one of the greatest rebuilds in SEC history slowly turned into what can be considered football constipation. Does this story end with a jubilating ending? Nope. Like so many Kentucky seasons before it, the ride eventually came crashing back down to the coal mines. So how did the greatest coach in Kentucky football history go from building a program out of the dust to being the one to collect it? Before that, we have to figure out about the man. Long before Mark Stoops ever stepped foot in Lexington, he had spent over 2 decades building a defensive resume more bipolar than Sunday night college football. After graduating from high school, he played defensive back for the Iowa Hawkeyes from 1986 to 1988 under Hawkeye legend Hayden Fry. While he wasn't destined for the big leagues, his football IQ impressed Fry enough that he stayed on as a graduate assistant from 1989 through 1991. From there, Stoops took an unconventional route. Instead of immediately climbing the college ranks, he spent 4 years at Nordonia High School in Ohio as both an athletic director and defensive backs coach. Can't remember the last time I ever heard of an AD and a college coach at the same time being successful. His first full-time college coaching opportunity came in 1996 when Jim Leavitt hired him to coach defensive backs for the brand new University of South Florida football program. Yes, Mark Stoops is a certified founding father of doubles football. Though he was there for only 1 season, it helped him establish recruiting connections in Florida that would prove invaluable later in his career. The following year, Stoops followed head coach Dana Dimmel to Wyoming, where he coached defensive backs from 97 through 99. When Dimmel became Houston's head coach in 2000, he promoted Stoops to co-defensive coordinator. Despite the 102nd ranked defense, it was impressive enough to the 7th floor. Stoops was hired by Miami to replace Chuck Pagano and the Hurricanes defensive backs coach, a move that completely changed the trajectory of his career. Stoops would coach future NFL stars like Ed Reed, early form Sean Taylor, and Antra Roll. Working with that elite secondary quickly established Stoops as one of the nation's rising defensive assistants. After 3 seasons in Coral Gables, another opportunity came calling, this time from family, Mark's brother. Not Bob Stoops, but another one, Mike Stoops. He was hired as Arizona's head coach for the 2004 season and brought upon Mark to Tucson to run the Wildcats defense. Arizona entered 2004 with the nation's 109th ranked defense. At least 7 spots ahead and improvement was guaranteed. Stoops transformed Arizona into one of the Pac-10's more respectable defensive units, earning a reputation as an aggressive coordinator capable of rebuilding struggling programs. Then came the job that truly launched him into the national spotlight. As if Miami already didn't do that. In December 11th of 2009, Stoops accepted Florida State's defensive coordinator position under everyone's favorite overpriced buyout, Jimbo Fisher. The Seminoles had slipped defensively, but Stoops engineered one of the quickest turnarounds in college football, transforming Florida State into one of the nation's best defenses just within a few seasons. So after that, he was one of the hottest head coaching candidates in the country. And hundreds of miles away, a certain big blue ball buster was desperately searching for someone capable of performing that exact same kind of resurrection. Before that though, you need to learn how to resurrect yourself some money with today's sponsor, Prize Picks. We're only a month away from kickoff of the 2026 college football season, so why wait until then to get into the action that Prize Picks has to offer? Prize Picks is America's #1 sports picks app, and it's one of the easiest ways to make every game you're watching a little more exciting. Building a lineup couldn't be simpler. Just lock in a few picks using a variety of different player stats and choose the ones you like best. There are always plenty of options to choose from across a huge variety of sports. Whether you're looking at three-pointers, rebounds, assists, goals, strikeouts, or countless other stats, you can choose the winner, the spread, or the total on any game or fight, giving you even more ways to play. It definitely makes every game just a little bit more entertaining. This newest lineup I made for the freshest games in the MLB is just an example of all the fun there is to be waiting on the app. And with all the promotions, there's no downside to playing along. Prize Picks is available in over 40 states, including California, Texas, and Florida. And for new users, they've got a brand new offer. Play a $5 lineup, and you can get $150 in lineups. Just download the Prize Picks app and use promo code HMA to get started. Big thanks to Prize Picks for sponsoring this channel, and as always, make sure to play responsibly. Here's a result of what happens when you aren't responsible with your program. In a state where basketball reigned supreme, football was less of an afterthought and more of an obligation. Every fall, fans counted down the days until basketball season because celebrating football involved being happy you didn't get blown out. The Wildcats entered the 2010s hoping beloved former Kentucky quarterback and assistant coach Joker Phillips could keep the momentum rolling after Rich Brooks had finally made the program respectable. There was genuine optimism at first. Phillips inherited a team with enough veteran talent to put together a respectable start, but once that roster began to thin out, the collapse was inevitable. Over the next 3 seasons, Kentucky spiraled into one of the worst stretches in school history. Phillips finished just 13-24 overall and an abysmal 4-20 in SEC play. Every Saturday served as a test of their fanhood. The 2012 season was especially brutal. Injuries piled up everywhere, starting with quarterback Maxwell Smith. But injuries only explain so much. If anything, they looked worse every week regardless of who was injured. The constant quarterback hokey pokey only made things more chaotic in the long run. Nothing ever stuck, and the offense completely lost its identity. It was destined to end with one of the most embarrassing performances in modern program history. Vandy humiliated the Wildcats 40-0 on their own field. The stadium was emptier than Akron's Money Bank. Commonwealth Stadium had become less of a home field advantage and more of a gauntlet for self-inflicted pain. At that point, it was hard to tell whether or not the fan base or the stadium itself would collapse first. To absolutely no one's surprise, Joker Phillips was sent off to the Shadow Realm the very next day. Wearing Kentucky football gear during this fiasco felt like wearing a giant kick me sign on your back. Athletic director Mitch Barnhart publicly insisted there was no timetable for finding a replacement, but behind the scenes the search moved much faster than anyone expected. It didn't take that much longer before Kentucky made one of the most important hires in school history. On November 27, 2012, Kentucky officially hired Stoops as the new head football coach, giving the longtime defensive coordinator his very first opportunity to run a college football program. It was a bold gamble, especially with that bold contract to go along with it, signing Stoops to a 5-year contract worth $11 million. Then again, Kentucky wasn't playing for proven results since that's above their pay grade, and there was plenty of reason to believe that this potential was actually real. Everywhere Stoops went, defenses got tougher, more disciplined, and sometimes significantly better. I mean, if the offense was always going to be optional, you might as well balance that out with a competent defense. Of course, rebuilding one of the worst football programs of all time wasn't going to happen overnight. Who do you think you are, Kirk Cignetti? He was inheriting one of the toughest jobs in the SEC. It would take time for him to harvest success in the coal mines, but it wasn't impossible. Long before the wins started piling up, he was already making a difference in the Lexington community. This is probably the part where Florida State claims they built him. Whether that was true or not, Big Blue Nation didn't care. They had finally found a coach who believed that they could scrape the Wildcats out of the SEC toilet. I wonder how that'll turn out. Well, Season 1 sure did start smoothly, but look at the bright side. Third place in the state of Kentucky is an accomplishment to celebrate. Stoops' first season was exactly what you'd expect from a coach inheriting one of the biggest rebuilding projects. There were flashes, little moments that made you think the Wildcats were showing some sort of competence on the field, but almost every sign of progress was then followed by a harsh reminder of just how far away from that they were. And sadly for them, said competence only made the games competitive. The Wildcats once again finished 2-10 overall. That conference losing streak had now reached a whopping 16 straight games. Every Saturday felt like the Wildcats were stepping into a gunfight armed with a pool noodle. Like against Florida, where Kentucky pulled off a perfectly executed fake field goal that completely caught the Gators off guard, and then proceeded to piss themselves the rest of the duration. Stoops himself showed his support for the team's efforts by informing us that guys are looking for a rock to hide under. At least you're forming a foundation, I guess. The problem with the foundations don't really satisfy impatient fan bases. The 2014 season finally gave Kentucky fans a reason to give something they haven't for decades: a single shit about their football team. The Wildcats finally broke through against Vandy and beat someone from their conference, worthy of a field rush. And then Kentucky started a streak of their own accord. The Wildcats opened the season 5-1, and suddenly Lexington was brightening up for a future before November. For a moment, it looked like Mark Stoops had accelerated the rebuild way ahead of schedule. Better fix that problem quickly.
Both of them lead the way. Here comes McGee, breaks free, touchdown. That'll do it.
What better time for the Mark Stoops defensive unit of the season to suddenly grow optional and let everyone score on them? No, literally, what better time because Barnhart pulled the trigger on a premature extension. It's a modicum of the SEC East. Better pick up the Stooper Scooper and get back to work. And just like that, the hype was back in record time. Mark Stoops had the fans believing again, and for the second straight season, the Wildcats looked like they were way ahead of schedule. They knocked off number 25 Missouri for Stoops' first ranked victory, opening the year 4-1. And once again, the optimism around Lexington reached levels that hadn't been seen in years. Better fix that problem quickly.
Four-man rush for Auburn. Tolles pressured though. Tolles trying to run, and he won't get there. They're going to blitzing. Dobbs picks it up.
Kentucky once again completely fell apart down the stretch, losing 6 of their next 7 games and finishing short of December again. Coal for Christmas, my favorite, right? The collapse featured some truly mind-numbing moments, none worse than the Vanderbilt game. Kentucky had first and goal from the 1-yard line, 3 feet to gain, 3 feet. They somehow scored 0 points. It's the kind of red zone clown show that would become a reoccurring theme throughout the Stoops era. Quarterback Patrick Towles also helped kick off another reoccurring Kentucky tradition: quarterbacks who suddenly turned completely pedestrian once they got inside the opponent's 20-yard line. Thankfully, Kentucky had one November cupcake left on the schedule to stop the bleeding, because if not for that win, Stoops would have entered year 4 carrying a 7-game losing streak. Maybe one day, you'll be on Mississippi State's level. Said project starts with beating their in-state cousin from Hattiesburg, which, based on your 25-point lead, I'd be willing to say that you're taking care of that. It's at this moment that I'd like to introduce you to yet another moment on the Dipshit Hall of Fame.
To the air. Fill up with finger licking good sauce. It's tender. It's juicy.
Isaiah
It's
Jones
delicious.
to the house.
Tenders,
Jones will
tigers,
try to
and
sneak it in. The tight end in motion.
Yes.
Wide open in the end zone. He makes the catch.
My
Mullins will try to
$5
sneak it in.
fill you
Is
up.
he in on the second
Guaranteed.
effort?
And that last
Touchdown, Southern Miss, and they have taken the lead.
So how exactly are you going to recover from that one? Optimism was now rage. Football season was now basketball offseason. But then, something clicked. Stoops somehow rallied the Wildcats from that disastrous 0-2 start to a daggum bowl game. It took 3 years of plowing, planting, and growing before the results finally began to show. A huge reason for that turnaround was quarterback Steven Johnson, who took over the offense and didn't plant a landmine on the feet of his own team. Moreover, Johnson absolutely loved this shit. They even got a jump on their rival. Not a conference one, but a rival all the same. Hell, I'd argue this was more important. It was the Wildcats' first victory over Bobby Petrino at Louisville and one of the biggest wins of the Stoops era to that point. And how fun is it after years of no December that they are going to be going bowling they died? For the first time since ever, the Wildcats are playing consistently respectable, stupendous football. But of all the demons left to slay, Florida seemed like the one most within reach. Kentucky entered Gainesville with its best team in years and held a 27-14 lead in the fourth quarter. It looked like the Wildcats were finally going to snap their agonizing 30-game losing streak against the Gators, but then Luke Del Rio came alive. His performance was distracting to say the least. Too distracting.
Kentucky trying to run a man up, wide open, touchdown Florida. Freddie Swain was left all alone, and for the second time tonight, Kentucky gets caught napping.
And that's an all too common theme we like to call stooping the bed. Despite the heartbreak, this season also marked the rise of Stoops' most significant contributor to his career, Benny Snell Jr., who quickly became the face of Kentucky football and the engine behind his offense. It also marked the beginning of another Stoops trademark: run through a motherfucker's face and pray it works. Kentucky managed to carry momentum and snapped a signature W over Tennessee. Although, to be fair, that talent-fee squad was arguably the worst in program history. Nonetheless, Stoops had done the unthinkable. He actually made Kentucky football consistently respectable. And how fun is it after years of no December to be going back to a bowl game again? Ref Ball Power Trip says, "Excuse me and kindly go fuck yourself." But the frustrating ending set up Stoops and the Wildcats for an unforgettable experience the following year. If there was ever a peak for Mark Stoops' tenure at Kentucky, it was 2018. Jubilation in Lexington had reached an all-time high. Legend of the Wildcats, Terry Wilson, took over at quarterback, continuing Kentucky traditions of quarterbacks whose greatest strength was handing the ball off. Fortunately for them, they had far bigger stars carrying the team. Benny Snell cemented himself as the school's all-time leading rusher, while over on the defense, they are just as monstrous. Josh Allen, not that one, but the other Josh Allen, was an absolute wrecking ball off the edge. Allen finished his career with a school record 31.5 sacks, and all this talent culminated in the peak era of Kentucky football. After 31 straight losses, the Wildcats had finally beaten Florida for the first time in 32 tries. Decades of factorial pain had vanished overnight. The party only got crazier in the season when Kentucky pulled off a dramatic comeback against Missouri. Lexington was hype, Stoops was crowd surfing over his own players. It was the perfect image of a coach who had finally earned his moment. However, there was a leak within the machine. As previously mentioned, Stoops never could get his ace in quarterback form. Run through a motherfucker's face could only get him so far, as shown against the walls of Texas A&M and Georgia. Someone with far less prestige was bound to recognize the pattern and take full advantage of it accidentally. And your answer is right here. Even in the peak of their program, Kentucky still couldn't avoid crawling back into the rock the moment they went down to Rocky Top. Granted, the playoffs are off the table by this point, but you'd think that this would be the year that Kentucky finally gets the jump on Tennessee. It hardly mattered in the grand scheme of things. They managed to get to the all-too-legendary Citrus Bowl. Before the game, James Franklin confidently declared Penn State was the real blue and white, just for him to pull a moment we all now refer to as Big Game Saves! Safe to say he probably regrets saying that. Benny Snell capped off his legendary Kentucky career by leading the Wildcats to one of the biggest bowl wins in program history, and Stoops was rewarded by being named SEC Coach of the Year, becoming the first Kentucky coach to win that honor since Jerry Claiborne back in 1983. The Wildcats finished with 10 wins for the first time since '77. After years of planting the seeds, Mark Stoops had finally harvested one of the greatest seasons Kentucky football had ever seen. Little would he know that his greatest coaching job would be performed the next season. Just not in the way he was hoping for. The football gods had it out for Stoopy and the gang this time. If 2018 was the season where everything went right, then 2019 was the season where everything absolutely went wrong. And Kentucky still found a way to win somehow. The entire year became an exercise in overcoming adversity. With the entire Kentucky offense of last season declaring for the Pittsburgh Steelers, it paved the way for Terry Wilson to become the hero. Never mind, he got consumed by the injury bug. It paved the way for backup Sawyer Smith to become the hero. Never mind, he got consumed by the bug too. With your backup now becoming consumed as well, it paved the way for whoever the third string might be. Wait, you don't have a third string?
My ass hurts.
Well, if the headline didn't go ahead and spoil things, it was at this moment Kentucky outright decided the forward pass was optional. Stoops reinvented the offense from the ground up and changed the name of the team to the Read Option University Wildcats. And somehow, it worked. Bowden ended the year with the most rushing yards in the conference, which surpasses the likes of DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Behind his electric athleticism and one of the nation's most bullshit offenses, Kentucky ripped off a strong finish of the regular season, ending 7-5 while absolutely demolishing Louisville on Senior Day. What kind of roids did they put in that bourbon? Unfortunately for Stoops, this is where the magic comes to a halt. That's the standard for everyone this season because it's the COVID year and nobody can be happy. Asking him, though, to navigate a 10-game SEC-only schedule felt like a bit too much. And, well, as it turned out, they were right. They stumbled through an inconsistent season where the offense was more like 3-and-out simulator. The opener against Auburn perfectly summarized how the year was going to go. Just before halftime, Chris Rodriguez appeared to score the go-ahead touchdown, clearly breaking the plane of the goal line, but then... SEC ref ball moment. It felt like the perfect omen for the rest of Kentucky's season. Better one-up that by deciding the best use of your punter was asking him to run a fake punt. Because me, Mark Stoops, running football is only solution. The rest of the season followed suit with this inconsistency. However, that took a back seat following an incident where tragedy struck the team midway through. Offensive line coach John Schlarman, one of the most respected members of the program, unfortunately passed away during the season after a courageous battle with stage 4 cholangiocarcinoma. Yet the Wildcats rallied around his memory throughout the remainder of the season. Stoops guided Kentucky to another bowl appearance, taking down Dave Doran in the Gator Bowl to secure the program's third consecutive bowl victory. It wasn't the season Kentucky had hoped for, but good times like this for Kentucky football don't last an eternity, unlike all their bad times. This season ushered in a new age of Kentucky football. After years of grinding out wins behind defenses and 0 passing yards, the Wildcats handed the keys to Penn State transfer Will Levis. And suddenly, the offense had a completely different feel for once. Levis brought a stronger arm, tougher mentality, and of course, his very odd-flavored coffee. Bitter just like the program. Despite that, Kentucky raced out to a 6-0 start. Suddenly, Kentucky was ranked just outside the top 10. They had legitimate SEC East aspirations, and it all lined up with a trip to Athens, Georgia on College game day. So, how'd that go?
Those 3 tailbacks used today, they fake it to him. Bennett's going to loft it. Bowers has got it. Touchdown, Georgia again to the tight end.
Are we really that surprised? Running headfirst into one of the greatest defenses of the modern era didn't pan out the way they tried to manifest. But with an actual passing game, highlighted by elite receiver Wan'Dale Robinson, who made up half of the passing game, managed to save the season. They put together a record-breaking performance in the Citrus Bowl against Iowa, and that makes it Kentucky's second Citrus Bowl win in 4 years, a 4th consecutive bowl victory, and another 10-win season to go along with it. What a stupendous season it's gone.
Well, fuck.
Years later, the NCAA violations resulted in Kentucky vacating every win from that season. We're going to remember that 6-game winning streak. This year marked a major milestone for Stoops, as he entered his 10th season as Kentucky's head coach and officially became the longest tenured coach in program history. By this point, Stoops had completely changed the perception of Kentucky football. But of course, even with all of their football successes of recently, there was still one thing willing to remind everyone of Kentucky's football inferiority complex: basketball. Their coach John Calipari had some wise words to say, calling Kentucky a basketball school. What? Anyway, Stoops did not exactly take too kindly to that comment, and he made sure his team had something to say about it. He backed that up early in the season, leading Kentucky to a road win over Florida and Billy Napier, who just dropped a top 10 Utah. And with that win, he became the winningest football coach in school history. But while the defense continued to improve under Stoops, the offense quickly became useless again. Will Levis, who entered the season getting the glot from draft agents, had been taken over by the ghost of Terry Wilson, and the Kentucky offense became painfully predictable. Was Mark Pope coaching this team too? To be fair, Levis wasn't completely to blame. Kentucky's offensive line was held together by duct tape, and the Wildcats ranked near the bottom of the SEC in rushing offense despite having talented running back Chris Rodriguez Jr. in the backfield. Once the season started slipping, things went downhill fast. A devastating loss to Ole Miss after an interception in the final moment started the collapse, and remaining competition absolutely wiped Kentucky off the map. But no Wildcat collapse is complete without the clown show of brighter proportions than ever before. Vandy entered this version of the game riding a 26-game SEC losing streak, and thanks to some classic stupidity, Kentucky kept it at 26. That sent the fan base into a meltdown. For those hoping Stoops would be gone from that, great news! Kentucky had already locked him in, as he signed another contract extension, keeping him in Lexington through 2030. Congratulations! That season mercifully ended with the Music City Bowl against Iowa. Couldn't draw that matchup better if you tried. Magic was in the making once again. The Wildcats opened the year 5-0, climbed to number 20 in the AP poll, and picked up wins over Florida and Vandy. After years of consistency under Mark Stoops, it felt like another 10-win season was within reach. Better fix that problem quickly.
Play on their first two possessions to the end zone. Snap and a touchdown. Powers is wide open.
And there's the dud. The biggest highlight to come from it was the transfer running back in Ray Davis, who became one of the best players on the team. NC State transfer Devin Leary joined a long line of Terry Wilsons. The results fans were looking for still never came. Even in his best games, red zone aneurysms paved the way for another loss. Stoops himself did the smart thing and blamed NIL on the fans? How many of these dumbass SEC coaches are gonna make this mistake? There's no better way to alienate the fans by blaming them and then asking them for more of their money for your success. The season ended as you'd expect. Against Clemson in the Gator Bowl, the Wildcats looked like they had everything under control, but then aneurysms. Kentucky gave the game to Clemson by committing 4 fourth-quarter turnovers, allowing Clemson to storm back and keep Dabo's favoritism for the future. During this dramatic episode, rumors began swirling that Stoops was getting some eyes from a conference neighbor in need of a new coach. Texas A&M was interested in hiring Stoops as their next man up. That idea immediately caused chaos among everyone involved. Nobody wanted him there, including most Kentucky fans. I know he hasn't been too successful as of recently, but I mean, who else was successful? So naturally, A&M pulled the plug on that idea and hired Mike Elko instead, leaving Stoops in Lexington for better or for worse. Much, much worse. This edition of The Run started with controversy off the bat, as the NCAA came down with randomly targeted probations, but there was much bigger cold rocks to mine. The biggest problem was an offense that ranked among the worst in the country, once again searching for answers at quarterback with another highly touted transfer in Brock Vandergriff, but he failed to provide the spark delusional bourbon chuggers were anticipating. The rage from the fanbase was accelerated from Stoops doing what Stoops does best when coaching: nothing. Kentucky had the top-ranked team in the land on the ropes, trailing just 13-12 with around 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter while facing a 4th and 8 near midfield. Instead of going for it and trying to keep the upset bid alive, Stoops threw that to the defense, which, as you'd expect, be another mistake that would follow him for eternity. Stupidity indeed. On such a level, in fact, that you had players going to the concession stands mid-game. Gerald Mincy could attest to that. Like many coaches who spend over a decade at one school, Stoops struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing landscape of college football, especially with NIL, recruiting, and roster management becoming more important than ever. After getting neutered by the Beer Birdies, it solidified a 4-8 season, the worst one since his debut year. Collapses like that lead to Mike Gundy or James Franklin getting sent off to the Shadow Realm. So how in the world did Stoops manage to come out of this season alive?
They do their job. That kick is no good.
You might as well be in different leagues, not conferences, different leagues.
Elaine Kiffin, the meme that never dies. Stoops made it clear going into 2025 how much Lexington meant to him, saying, "This is my home." And moreover, he made it clear how motivated he was to be in this position. On that note, I'll let someone else take the mic so that he can give his 2 cents on how motivated Stoops was this season.
There's no quitting me.
The 2025 season was the least inspiring football I have ever seen Kentucky put on the field, and there was just no hope in the building from the start. You could feel it. When we rolled Zach Calzada out there to start the year, I just didn't even want to tune in, but like a bad relationship that you keep going back to, of course I did. Of course there was this little bit of hope, and that's what drew me in. For our first game, we were able to beat Toledo by 8. Toledo, a MAC school. I know that they're one of the better ones, but it is still a huge talent gap between the two, and I could just see from that game off the start, our offense was not going to be enjoyable for the whole season. Then we kept it tight against Ole Miss, and that little bit of hope that sucks you in had you bought right back in, except in typical Kentucky fashion. We couldn't finish that game. Then we go to South Carolina a couple weeks later, and we just got dominated from the start. That is when I completely lost all hope. I was already out, then it was no shocker we lost to Georgia, but then I get to go out to Kroger Field to see my favorite team take on Arch Manning and Texas, and our defense played incredible in this game. By now we have put in Cutter Boley, so there's a little bit of a hope that maybe Kentucky can do something. You could almost feel the fans coming together for one final push. It was a night game, we had the light show going on, and we actually sent this game to overtime, but then we ran, and we lose to Texas, and we just can't get it done. And I think that was the final straw. By this point, if you go to a game, you're just going to hear every single fan talking about when Mitch Barnhart is going to fire Mark Stoops, because nobody has hope for the future of Kentucky football. I think everybody was just ready for some change. Sometimes that's something that you need in football. Even coaches that end up doing great things for a program, like Mark Stoops did for Kentucky, you have to move on at some point. I will always be thankful for what he was able to do, where he took the Wildcats from where they were at when he took over. However, I do think ever since the story leaked that he was on his way out to Texas A&M and then that fell through, fans were a little bit more harsh on him. We judged him a little bit more critically because that was just a big hurt to us. Again, I am thankful for what Mark Stoops did for Kentucky football. I could sit here and trash on some of the product that I had to watch, that I had to endure while he was here, but there were also a lot of positives. We were ready for a change, and I'm very excited to see if Will Stein can get Kentucky to the next level.
Get out! The Grove Street Party was officially over. After more than a decade of stability, Mark Stoops' time in the Beer Belly State came to an end. Stoops had completely changed the trajectory of their program, taking the Wildcats from one of the worst teams in the SEC to a team that could consistently compete. He guided Kentucky to significant feats, but eventually the momentum disappeared and the magic faded. Stoops finished his Kentucky tenure with a 72-80 record, which honestly says a lot about the state of the program. The decision was expensive too. Kentucky owed Stoops a $38 million buyout, making it one of the largest buyouts in college football history. And to think they could have saved that for another beatdown of the Sweet 16. But after 12 seasons, the Wildcats believed a fresh direction was necessary. One of the biggest reasons Stoops lasted as long as he did was the stability surrounding the program. Barnhart and the university president had both been in their roles for over a decade too, and they wanted to keep the party together. Bad news for Wildcats fans since Barnhart is still there. But with Stoops gone, Barnhart was tasked with making perhaps the most important hire of his tenure as athletic director. Kentucky eventually turned to Louisville native Will Stein. Stein had deep Kentucky ties and was a young blood in the growing world of college football coaching. Feed the studs, he said. The studs have been starving for over 100 years. As for Mark Stoolsoftener, after leaving the coal mines, he traded them in for the cow pastures in Austin, Texas. He joined Steve Sarkisian's ever-growing rehabilitation clinic, taking on a role as a special assistant under him and Will Muschamp. Most Kentucky fans expected Stoops to eventually walk away from coaching altogether within the next few years before ever considering leaving them. So is this a bridge back into another head coaching job, or is he just finding joy in a lower pressure role? Or is he simply waiting for the right opportunity? Whatever happens next, there's one thing Mark Stoops knows how to do. It's build a football program the old-fashioned way. See you in Iowa once Kirk Ferentz retires.
Pick up your shovel and get back to the coal mines, baby.
Time's expired. Time's expired. Just bat it down. Bat it down. It's done. We beat Louisville. We beat Louisville. We beat Louisville. We beat Louisville, baby. Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. We just beat Louisville. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. You're greatest day. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Well, looks to me like the studs got a decade-long ration out of that.